Hey guys, I know accountability is a scary word for some of you, especially if you're a more timid or reserved type of leader. But what if I told you holding your team and yourself accountable can be the difference of success and failure in your childcare organization? We're going to be joined today by Vernon Mason, and if you don't know who Vernon is, you will by the end of this episode. I'm sure we'll have a few laughs as well. I want you to feel relaxed when we talk about the word accountability. It doesn't have to be stressful or overwhelming. I want you to feel confident and empowered when you think about how you are going to hold your team accountable and yourself. Because let's face it, if you're the leader and you hold yourself accountable, your team will too. You are tuned in to the Childcare Director's Chair podcast. I'm your host, Erica Sicoccio. Let's dive in. Hey guys, so we are joined with Vernon Mason. He is a dynamic author, expert, coach. He talks about so many things, but today we're going to talk about specifically about accountability. He has two great books. Well, he has many books, but two of my favorite books in my library are his Don't Go, which is a practical guide for tackling employee turnover, which we all know I talk about a lot, and Get Out. But before you go, practical steps to turn your zero into a hero or set them free. So intentional titles and intentional books. So great job there. And welcome to the show, Vernon.
Set them free. You
Set
went with
them-
a song.
I
So
did.
I'm wearing my green since they just released Wicked. So I didn't know this was going to be a sing along.
This is a musical.
Well, we're in trouble with your guest. I can sing it, but you don't want to hear it. Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here with you. I'm honored to be in the director's chair. You know, in the reality, I was a single site owner director for, I believe it was between 16 and 17 years, right? And so I've walked the walk. I've stood in those shoes. I just literally told you a story about literally multiple times in my career being in the bathroom and them knocking on the door. And I'm like, I'm I'm literally in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Can we wait a minute? Is the building, are you telling me the building's on fire and I need to run for my life? Really, is it that important?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, I think that's why people like my books is because they're relatable, because they come from a point, and there's room for theory
Sure.
and philosophy, right? But my books have a little bit of theory and a whole lot of practicality, right? It's a lot of try this, do this, try this, put this into play. You can start this tomorrow, right? That kind of thing. And I think that so many of us, that's what in our field they really want, is they want information that it's accessible and relatable. Because as you said again before we started, we start in this field, most of us, because we're heart centered.
Yeah.
Right? We start off with our heart. Why do we get in this field? Because the reason I got in this field is because my mom was a home care provider. I loved to see her interact with those children she cared for. They literally became like family. And not to go down this path, but one of the children she cared for in her home spoke at her funeral.
Yeah.
Oh, it was the most touching thing. And what she said was, they called my mom Miss Nancy. She said, Miss Nancy not only challenged me to be a better parent, but challenged me to be a better human.
Yeah.
Is there anything better that could be said, right?
No.
So we all go into this field because we love to see people grow and nurture the children. And then I became very passionate about growing the people who grow the children. Where my mom was passionate about growing the children, I became passionate about growing the people that grow the children.
Yeah. We share that passion.
Yeah.
So unlike so many of you, I did not start in this field knowing I was going to love the children. I didn't. I came this way of the parent side. I had a child and I said, I'm not leaving my child with people I did not know. And so I went and looked at centers, and there were so many, and there were plenty of great programs. But I was an Italian mama, and that was my first baby, and so I quit my job. And the good news is I come in the whole other way. I came from a business background,
Yeah.
so but oh my god, and I fell in love, and so then I hook, line, and sinker ever since, and that's like 26 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting that you mentioned that. I am finding there is a substantial portion of people in our industry who are being very successful,
Hmm.
but they're not early childhood people.
Hmm.
And I think one of the reasons they're finding success is because they're not coming at it as under this lack, under this we can't do that. It's early childhood. We can't afford to do that because that's early childhood. Early childhood doesn't do that. They come at this as a numbers, as a crunch, right? This is what we can do. This is what will work. And they don't come at it with that limited mindset. And I have a master's degree, so I
Hmm.
believe in education. But I will say one of the things that kind of is nurtured along through the educational process of early childhood people is this limitation, right?
Hmm.
Is it, and so yeah, so I applaud you, and now I understand why you have been so dramatically successful, because I think there's absolutely room at the table, and I believe that these people who don't come at it with an early childhood background are really pushing the us to really think outside the box, and I,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
applaud that.
I think it's a marriage between the two. I
Hmm.
think I think it's a marriage between the two. I
Yeah.
think it's coming certainly heart centered, but not
Hmm.
business foolish either, right?
Hmm.
So it's somewhere in
Yeah.
between. It's the marriage of the two, and
Yeah.
so yeah, in the industry is in a interesting place right now.
Yes.
Lots of opportunity, right? Because we're always positive here. Lots of opportunity, and so you have to decide how are you going to move forward as a leader. And so with that, we will roll into accountability because that's where it starts, right? You've got to have a plan, but if you don't have a plan and we can all talk about we can pivot and this and that, but if you don't have a plan and then who's going to help you with that plan and how we're going to roll that out, it's just a plan on a piece of paper and nothing's going to
Absolutely.
happen, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to pivot for a second.
Okay.
You bring up a plan, and my third book, and this one that I released last year, about a year ago, right, last year, a year ago. It's called "Don't Waste a Crisis." And it released it on Amazon, and it hit number one in the self-employment category on Amazon. And it is one of the main caveats of this book
Yeah.
is having a plan, right? I started out in this industry with a plan. My mom didn't have a plan, right? She struggled paying the bills. My mom and dad struggled paying the bills, and I started out in this industry with a plan, and I knew where we were going. Right to the fact, I didn't think about it initially, but when we first opened our first program, I wanted to honor my mom, and so we named it after her, Miss Nancy's Childcare. Well, after a couple of years, I started paying attention to the industry, and I knew that at some point she'd want to retire. At some point, I'd want to probably sell and move on and to do something else. And I realized, oh, part of our value is our reputation.
Okay.
Part of that reputation is the name. And so I had to approach her and say, we have to change the names. Well, that's in the book, and it completely explains it. But it really is. And I just took that plan from there on that I knew. And it was 26 years later that we sold, that I changed the name. We owned child care centers for 28 and a half years. So 26 years later, I sold, but I changed the name in year two because I had a plan. I knew where we were going. So yeah, so you're absolutely right. You have to have a plan. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Labor Department has released a study that actually is not great news for us. See, so many of us think that we are going to get back the way we were before,
Mm.
that it's going, and where we are, we're in our new normal. And actually the Labor Department says that we are actually in a forever labor shortage,
Mm.
meaning they are never anticipating having the numbers in the workforce that we had. So for example, in 2000, 67.4% of the population were working. They are anticipating that in 2032 that it's going to drop to 60.4%. So drop 7%. So we are in that steady decline. So even as the population increases, the percentage of people who are working is going to go down. So the reality is, and the kind of the unpopular thing to say, a decade, 2 decades ago, we had plenty of help.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember the day of putting an ad in our local newspaper for this minimum wage job,
Mm-hmm.
and getting a stack of
Mm-hmm.
paper applications that long, and I just go through. I wouldn't even get through the whole stack before I'd hire somebody, right? And then 3 months later, I'd go through the stack again if I needed somebody, and 3 months later, I'd go through the stack again, and I'd sort them out in the ones we'd never hire, the ones absolutely something comes up we would hire, right? And we keep hoping that it's going to, but the reality is, why was that? It's because there were so many people in the workforce. There was more people in the workforce than there were jobs. So we would take advantage of there are people looking for jobs. There's nothing else out there. So now they start trickling into childcare. Well, that's not possible anymore, because there are more jobs than there are people looking for jobs. So yeah, so the struggle there is we have to be proactive about hiring and proactive about training, because I believe that the most people are hiring people that are less experienced and less educated than they've had in decades.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to put more time, more energy in onboarding them and training them and building relationships with them early on to get them. Do they know what you expect, right? Do they know how you believe children should be treated? And, I can tell you 20 years ago, 25 years ago, more than once, I took a new staff member down to a classroom and said, "Hey, Miss Sally, this is Miss Julie. She's going to be your new co-teacher or your new teacher assistant," and put her in there and forget about her. And she wouldn't get a lunch. And then about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like, "Where's Miss Julie?" "Oh, no," and go down and say, "Oh, Miss Julie, how's it going? Oh, you didn't get a lunch. Oh, I'm so sorry. I got so busy. I forgot about you." Yeah. So we've got to be more purposeful than that, right? We really got to get back at it. So I like to talk about, we have kind of become directors have become, and owners feeling like we don't have power anymore. Like, I've even heard a director say, "I feel as if I've been held captive by my employees. If I hold them accountable, they're going to walk out and leave. And they know I'm already short staffed, and they know they have me over a barrel. They know that I can't make the decisions I did." So I say, take back your power. How do you take back your power? You've got to hire. And I work with directors and I work with owners, and they'll say, "Oh, we need 3 people. We can't enroll children because we don't have enough staff. We need these." And I'll say, "Well, where do you get your applicants?" And most everyone always says Indeed, right? And I'll say, "Well, who's in charge, right, of going through the applicants from Indeed, looking for people on Indeed?" And they'll say, "Oh, it's me, whatever, whoever it is." It's different depending on the company. And I'll say, "When's the last time you were on there?" Almost every time they'll say, "Well, I, I normally try to get on there on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
But, last Wednesday I was off. And then the Wednesday for that, I got busy. I had to cover in the classroom." I'm like, "So it's been 2 weeks since you've
Those people
even."
already been hired.
Absolutely. So
Those
all
people
those,
are hired.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're right on exactly. And what we are finding is that in order to get one good hire, you know how many people you have to have kind of in your funnel? You got to be working, come in for an interview. Let's interview.
10.
That's 12.
Yeah. I knew it was close. Yeah.
So yes, absolutely. You're on target, right?
Yeah.
So for those of you out there who are sitting there thinking, "Well, I need 3 people to be fully staffed," and you're working 2 people on Indeed, you will never get out of this hiring crisis. You'll never get caught ahead, because when you're only working 2 people, Number one, are those two going to show up for the interview? Who
Mm-hmm.
knows, right? It's probably 50-50, right? By the time you get those hired, you're going to have another opening come available. So it stays your.
Always
I,
hiring.
I interact with directors and others all the time that are just living in this crisis mode, this constantly short staff. They actually don't even realize it because it's become
Normal.
such a norm for them. So then I give them some ideas. What does it look like when you're working in a crisis mode? Well, when you're working in a crisis mode, you're having to develop a schedule every day, right? And if you're having to develop a schedule every day, I'm not talking about just, oh, Susie called in sick, so call in Betty to come in and cover. I'm
Mm.
not talking about that, but I'm talking about people who are literally almost every day sitting down like it's a fresh puzzle every day and putting it together and trying to
Yeah.
make it work.
Yeah. One of the great things is if you have multiple locations, there's a little secret for us. We have multiple locations and they're all on the same street. So I have a pool of 42 staff that I can
Yeah,
pull from.
yeah,
Now we do
yeah,
have consistency in our classrooms, but I've
yeah,
got 4 or 5
yeah,
people, and then we also have
yeah,
school age program. So my school age folks who are looking for full time, they work in the after school program in the afternoon, but during the day they can help cover teacher
yeah,
lesson plans. Like, so be strategic, and set
yes,
yourself up to win. Set
yes,
yourself up to win. We'll set ourselves up to fail. Set
we
yourself
do.
up to win.
Well, you come from I'm a generation before you, but we come from a generation where when you were doing childcare right with the budget, you are working it down to the half hour, to the 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That you were not overstaffed, not one part during the day. That when Miss Sally went home at 4:15, that Miss Julie rolled in there at 4:15. One walked out the door, one walked in the door, right? And there was no overlap. There was no, you
Yeah.
stayed within ratio, but you never had 3 people in that room when there's only supposed to be 2. And
Mm-mm.
I don't think we can't operate like that
You
anymore.
cannot. You cannot.
And the thing people will say, well, Vernon, how do we pay for it? And I'll say, you know what? You got to charge for it.
Mm-hmm.
I believe some of us are actually holding the rates down because they don't want to charge parents more. And people will say, oh, I don't feel like they can pay. They've got to pay. If they need the care, they've got to pay. So I'm a big proponent of knowing what your competitors are charging, knowing what they're offering. I call it a competitive analysis.
Mm-hmm.
See what they're paying, see what they're charging their people, see what they're offering, and make sure that you are following in line. Some of us are really high end providers, some of us are
Sure.
moderate. I was really proud of the company that we developed. We were childcare for the working class, right?
Yeah.
That's who we were, right?
Yeah.
We weren't for the really rich people. We weren't for the
It's,
real subsidy.
and
And
that's
we had a little bit of everything in there,
yes.
but the majority
Mm-hmm.
was the working class. And I love that. I love to
Mm-hmm.
see that one doctor's daughter interact with a child who is
Yes.
on subsidy and got
Yes.
invited to a birthday party. And you know what? No one's doing this research out there,
Mm-hmm.
but I guarantee you that we had children, and this is like it's all over the country. We're not an anomaly.
Yeah.
That there are children all over this country that I believe have benefited from those kind of environments and have become friends and had friends from
Mm-hmm.
Lord, I don't want to get myself canceled here, but you know what
Yeah.
I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They interacted with a different class of people than they were raised in,
I'll
and
help
they
you.
just, yeah,
I hope you
right,
not get canceled because that
yeah,
is my market. And I
yeah,
tell folks when they come in, people love, first of all, the diversity in my
yeah.
school is very intentional. And I'll say,
Mhm.
you'll pull in and there'll be a car with maybe a window that might have been duct taped because it doesn't close all the way
Yeah,
next to a brand new, Range
yes,
Rover, right? So I
yeah,
live in Warwick and we have a low income area and we have a middle class area and all their kids come, and then there's work neck, which is even a little bit higher end income.
yeah, yeah,
So I think that is as much as we love it and we see the benefit. I don't know that that's unique. I think there's a lot of cities that are like
yeah,
that,
yeah,
and the centers that are right in that middle. I feel like right now, especially, we're in a good spot. You're in a
yeah,
good spot,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
You're good. You're in
absolutely,
a good spot to compete.
yeah,
On top of the benefits, the
yeah,
other thing I thought was really interested, when we're talking about staffing and stuff. You can't afford it, but you can't afford to not. Because listen to what you're saying. You cannot bring in those 12 children in a toddler room because you don't have the toddler teachers. What is that costing you? You're still paying your rent. You're still paying all those things. So you're paying more. And then what is it costing you on the other end with your other staff? You're burning them out. They're going to leave. Your good people are going to leave. So you're really costing yourself more money by not continually employing. And then you can also weed out, like, if somebody calls out every week on you, then you don't give them 40 hours. I mean, come on, Vernon.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Let me tell you, that is the number one thing. Oh my goodness, that gets me frustrated is we, because we're heart-centered, because we think we're kind people, we don't make the tough decisions. One of my core beliefs was, when I was running childcare centers, is if you were an early morning person, you had to be on time and you had to come to work. You could not open my building and call in sick not once every other week. I'm sorry. I know people think I'm crazy. You call in once every other week, we're going to have a conversation, because
right.
I was not going to lay in my bed at 5:30 in the morning and scramble trying to find somebody who I trusted and I could get to open my building. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. I'm going to have the conversation. And so we literally, our conversations would go like this. We would have somebody new that would start. They didn't understand Mr. Vernon, and they would be late, or they would call in sick. You know how, we have these people who are scheduled 40 hours a week and they work 34 hours and 32 hours, 28 hours and 35 hours. And then they come and want more money. I'm like, well, number one, come to work. But anyway, that's another story.
Vernon.
I would have the conversation with them, and I would say, hey, I pulled your, I pulled that payroll, and I'd say, hey, I pulled payroll, and you've been late like 3 times. Oh, well, this and that and the other. I said, God, I get it. I know life is tough sometimes, and kids and work and homework, and I completely get it. But I just want to let you know, when you work here, you can't have early morning hours if you can't be here on time.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just
it's a new schedule.
Yeah, so we'll just go ahead and say, if you're late again, you're going to have to become a 9 to 6 person. And what do they say? They go, oh, I've got cheerleaders, I've got Girl Scouts, I got that. And I'll say, gosh, I hate that. So be on time. All right. And we have that one conversation. And I know directors that will go on with a tardy person like that for months, if not years. And the whole staff knows she's the one that rocks the boat all the time because she's late all the time, and they just tolerate it. They just accept it. I'm not that person. If you're good with my kids and you can't get to work on time, I'm going to give you a 9 to 6, because we can, our ratios aren't going to be messed up with 9 o'clock people.
Yes,
but
sir.
you come in, you will never have early morning hours
Yes,
if
sir.
you can't be here on time. And I'm just kind of cut and dry where that kind of goes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it comes to our own accountability, right? We're talking about holding ourselves accountable.
Yeah.
We're accountable to make sure that our programs are staffed correctly to make sure our children are safe. So it really is as cut and dry as that. And that I was laughing as you said, I pull up. I just had this conversation with an employee who was scheduled 40 hours. I said, you haven't hit 28 hours in months, honey. I gotta cut your hours. We gotta redefine this. What works for you? What works for me? Because I do love my team, but we got to find something that works for both of us. It has to be reciprocal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'll say, I have got the perfect position for you. I pulled your schedule. I pulled your payroll, your hours, and you've been averaging between 28 and 32 hours a week. I've got a 12 to 6 position. It's 30 hours a week. It'll be perfect. Now, they're not going to work them 30 hours either.
But it doesn't mess you up.
And they're going to stand on their head, right? Because you changed those hours. But I'm just like, girlfriend, it is what it is. But you know what else I've done? I've already got some before I ever have that conversation.
Sure.
I've got somebody coming in. I've got someone who down the hallway training, someone who's ready to step right into that position, because I'm not going to be put in the bind if I can help it. I'm going to be proactively hiring, again, because I'm one of those people. I don't like being powerless. I don't like the tail wagging the dog. right?
Yeah.
I'm going to be proactive. And so I will have people hired. I will go ahead and hire and hire and hire. And you know what? People say, oh, what if we run over? What if we run out of the budget? What if we have too many people? Then you know what? I guarantee you there's somebody who needs to go.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, you're tolerating something from somebody, either that teacher that isn't providing the kind of care you really want for your children, but they come to work. So
Hmm.
you tolerated it longer than you should, right? Or as we said, ad nauseum here, that teacher that won't come to work, right? They won't get the job done. I
Yeah.
guarantee you there's somebody that is probably needs to go.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I think, Freddie, you said two things that were really well. You said a lot of things that were great, but there are two things that stick to mind right away. And you said it really quickly. You said, "Well, I got someone down the home training." You need to always be cross training. If you're not cross training, you're again setting yourself up to fail, right? Got to cross train. Got to have people in because people get sick, right? I have like 6 girls in a center that can do a tour. I'm not rescheduling a tour,
Yeah,
right? My FTE is like 98% all day long because
yeah,
people are
yeah,
cross trained.
yes,
And the other thing is your teachers are tired and I don't want to say burnt out, but they're tired. And so having that one extra person really does allow them the autonomy for you to say, "Hey, does anybody want Friday off? I've got an extra teacher. Does anybody want Friday off?" Right? Because
yeah.
that also helps people feel like, "Oh my God, I can't call out sick or I can't make an appointment," right? Having that one or two extra people really relieves the stress for your staff.
I literally, true story, my probably one of the best directors I had over my 28 and a half years of a multi-site, and we were having a conversation, and she said, I'm gonna say Miss Brenda. She said Miss Brenda came and asked for tomorrow off because her son, is in the military and he's coming into town unexpectedly, and I was waiting for her to say I gave her the day off,
Hmm.
and she said, yeah, I had to tell her I couldn't give her the day off. This woman, this teacher had been there 20 years.
Mm-mm.
This teacher is the backbone. She said, literally, she said, well, I know Sheila's probably going to call in sick tomorrow because she misses a lot of Fridays, and so I can't give her the day. I had to take a breath and I said, you know, we're talking about a 20-year employee here who who is the type, if we called on her vacation and she was in town and said, we got in a bind, could you come back
Mm,
in? And now I wouldn't want to do that, but she would do it, right?
mm,
I said, we've got to have some faith and we've got to hold this other teacher accountable.
mm-hmm,
This teacher needs to have that because we get so formula 1 and 1 is 2 and I've got to have this many people here and I can't count on this one. So you're going to punish the best employee because of the weak employee? Because what research is showing us is your great employees that are working harder. Because by the way, do you know if you want to figure out who you need to get rid of when you're overstaffed, ask your best employees.
mm.
They'll tell you who they're working harder to
Cover for. Yeah.
keep things. Yeah, well, that's a great word. I don't. Yeah, but you're right because they're working harder. But what research shows is that they will work harder. They will carry the load, but there's a couple criteria.
Mm,
Number one, someone's got to tell me that. Someone's got to say, I really appreciate the way you have carried this toddler room while we've been in this little bit of hiring glitch. I really appreciate the way these parents haven't missed a beat. I've not had one complaint. These parents count on you and these kids count on you. And you know what? I know as an owner, I know as a director that I can trust you to take great care of these children. Number one, they've got to hear it.
mm-hmm,
They got to know that, right? Number two, they expect to make more money. What they don't expect is for them to make the same hourly rate as the person they're having to work harder to cover for.
yeah.
And that's why I know we've done some of this through COVID. We've done some across the board raises because we've had to bump up our pay, right, to be
Mm-hmm,
competitive at all for any job, right? We've had to bump up our pay. And I know we've done some across the board raises. We got to stop it. We got to stop that because when you give me 30 cent And this teacher who hadn't changed a diaper all day long, and I've changed every diaper in the classroom, and she got the same 30, or he got the same 30 cent I did. Mm,
Yeah.
mm. Explain that to me. Explain
Yeah.
that to me, because that math ain't a mathin'. That ain't a getting it right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So let's talk about accountability.
Okay.
We could talk all day. Verna, I think we could be in trouble here. So what strategies do you think that folks can use to hold their employees accountable for their actions, positive and negative? Like
Yeah.
both,
So
yeah.
my thought on this is a philosophy change, and that is avoiding and changing our mindset as a boss from command and control.
Mm,
You know, it no longer really works. Okay, I'm going to have to write you up for that, right? Because you're not getting that job done, right? Because if they're the wrong employee, you write them up, they're not coming back. They're done, right? And even if they do come back, they're still checked out. They're over it, right? So we've really got to bring the people in, our team in, to we're all in this together, right?
mm,
People with today's workforce, they want to do it because they want to do it. They
mhm,
want to do it because they think part of it was their idea. They want to do it because they feel like we're doing something unique or different, or
mhm,
they've had input in it. And so I always like to say things like, when I ask someone to do something, is, would you help me with something? Would you brainstorm with me? Could we think about this? I always like, before we, just from the littlest things to the big things, like if we're wanting to change the curriculum in our childcare programs, what typically happens is the owner will go to a conference,
mhm.
will talk to a vendor about this new curriculum, and that vendor will sell you to death on that new curriculum. And then we come back and we bring it into all our childcare centers and all our teachers, and we kind of push it down on top of them and say, hey, we've got this new curriculum. And those teachers are going, what you mean I got to work harder? I've got lesson plans for the next 40 years I've already developed, and now I've got to start over with a whole new curriculum and themes and processes and how we do it, and what was wrong with the curriculum we had before. And oh, I've heard of this new curriculum. I used it where I worked before, and it was bad, right? And as owners, we internalize when people question, when people, we think they're challenging us, when in reality they're just trying to understand, why do we even have a new curriculum? So I like to bring the stakeholders in.
Mhm.
Zoom is your best friend, especially if you're multi-site. With having a group of people in this example, I would say, hey guys, we're thinking of changing our curriculum. We would love to know your pros and cons, your thoughts about what we're currently using, what you think it's weak on, what you think we need more of. If you've used other curriculums where you've worked before, or when you were in school, if you studied other curriculums, if you have some ideas, I've got a list of curriculums I think we should research. And you have these series of meetings, and you bring these stakeholders in where they are able to give input and influence, and so they see the process, and then ultimately it winds up with you selecting cumulatively with your team a new curriculum that you all have gotten buy-in in it. So when you finally do select the curriculum and you roll it out at all your locations, you have these little planted cheerleaders out there that say, "Yeah, we developed this. We researched. We bought into
Mhm.
this. We really did. Or we have chosen the best curriculum out there," rather than shoving things down on them. And it can be big things. That's a big thing. It could be little things. Hey guys, in the afternoon, it seems to be a little chaotic. We're having a staff meeting next week. I want you guys to bring your ideas. Let's brainstorm. What can we do in the afternoons from like 3:30 on? Because people are going home, lunches get behind, so our coverage is not always on time. And let's all brainstorm. What can we do to make our afternoons flow better, right? Because I will guarantee you will learn something when you ask open-ended questions from your team. You'll learn something from those stakeholders because they're working it every day. When we try to bounce from the outside inside to fix something who we don't really even know. Well, because if your team doesn't think it's a problem and you're trying to fix something that's not a problem, again, they're like, what is this about? Why are we even doing this? So involving the stakeholders, staying in communication, staying knowledgeable of what's going on in your schools, and making sure that you have avenues for your stakeholders to communicate with those in charge, right? So they can make sure they share their thoughts and their processes and what's working and what's not working. And hey, we need to work on this a little bit. This is a challenge, so that it doesn't come and hit you as a surprise.
Yeah. It's funny as we're talking about accountability, but the things that we're talking about here really is no secret, I guess. They seep into why our employees stay. It's just that mindset right there. Like asking them,
Mhm.
including them. And then
Including,
I love too, you said the little cheerleader, because
yeah.
leadership is not just the title, like you're the admin, you're the leader. No, not always. There's a couple teachers in your school that
Mhm.
are also the leaders, and whether they others will look to them to say, is this it, or is this a this, right?
Mhm.
So if there's something that you really do need, that has to change, get those
Right.
cheerleaders on your
Yeah,
team to help
absolutely.
unify the
Yeah,
troops, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and again, like you said, that it's really teamwork.
yeah.
Um,
I like to
so
start out, especially with new people. I like to start out, and I know we talk a lot. Simon Sinek talks a lot about the why,
mm,
and like I like to talk about the why when I'm especially when you have new people coming on board and they're not quite hitting the mark where they want to be. Like, there is an example. I'm sure everybody's heard the story about the visitors that visited NASA. They ran into a janitor in the hallway that was pushing janitor cart, and someone went up to them and said, "What do you do for NASA?" And they said, "I help put people in space." Now that's buy-in.
mm,
And so, how do you bring that down into early childhood? So, I had this teacher who it was her responsibility. She would come in early. We would pay her. She would come in early. She was our lunch covers. And it was her job to keep the plants in the lobby alive, keep the lobby looking good, keeping it vacuumed and swept, and the doors cleaned and swept around the outside, right? And she was doing a marginal job at best, right? And she would allow them to pull her away, right? And I would have to go to the leadership and say, hey, she needs to be able to get her job done. She can't get it done, right? And they say, well, she's kind of on her own going down and helping rather than us telling. I said, okay. So I'd have a conversation with her and I said, look, now it's really important that you make sure the lobby is clean. I know that you think it's probably optional. I said, but you keeping that lobby clean allows us to give people raises. And she was like a Labrador. She turned her head like, right? And I said, yeah. I said, because when people come in here to tour and
mhm,
our lobby is clean and straight and professional and smells good, the plants are alive, the doors don't have tongue prints and fingerprints all over. You know how kids will lick the glass, all that kind of
mhm,
stuff, right? It looks like it's loved. Those people will enroll. But when
mhm,
they come in, the door is nasty, the plants are dying,
mhm.
the lobby needs not to be vacuumed, it needs to be raked before it's vacuumed, right? People come in and go, well, if they can't take care of a lobby,
Yeah.
they surely can't take care of my child.
Mhm.
Keeping this center full, staying at capacity, and allows us to have the revenue, the resources that it takes to pay people what we want to pay them, and
Mhm.
enables us to give raises. So giving them the why is vital, especially when they're new, because they don't have buy-in. So you've got to give them the path to getting buy-in.
Yeah, I love that. Um, so what ways can parents be involved in promoting accountability within your childcare center? Talk about
Wow.
staff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say having an open communication. I'm not talking about just coming up complaining about anything
Yeah.
and everything, all because there are some people that the Lord Himself could not take care of their child. They're going to find some reason to complain, right? And I'm like, girlfriend, one word, nanny. But anyway, but there are people that when there are some people that when they complain, they're really challenging you to be better.
Mhm.
They're really challenging you because they've bought into what they believe. Erica believes how she wants her children treated, and they're trying to let you know I don't think they're meeting your expectations. And there's no one better to judge how well you're doing than those good parents, right?
Yeah.
Not, like I said, not the ones that are complaining at nauseum, but the ones you
Sure.
rarely hear from. And I also believe that when someone complains, someone brings something to your attention, there are many times there are more people who feel the same way.
Yeah.
And I also learned over the years that parents will lie through their teeth. They'll say, "Oh, my job has changed. Yeah, I'm moving here or I'm moving
Mm-hmm.
there, or grandma's going to retire and going to keep the kids, and then I'm going to the grocery store to pick up milk because we don't have
Mm-hmm.
enough milk for today." And I watch, and the mom's going into the child care center down the road. I'm like, "Well, I guess the grandma's retiring, is working at that child care center because
Yeah.
there she is, right?"
Yeah.
So yeah, so we want to pat ourselves on the back when somebody leaves and go, "Well, it's nothing that we did." Really?
Yeah.
Really? It's not really, really better
I
dig
love
into
it.
that. Better dig into that a little bit to really. So there is some truth in when parents
Hmm.
leave or parents complain. We have to work to get that front, and
Yeah.
we also have to thank them when they are bringing something
Yeah.
to our attention that we didn't know. We also need to thank them.
Yeah, I have a couple parents who I absolutely adore who will give me feedback, unsolicited and solicited, but very open, honest feedback. And one of them I just truly love. And I find that even when I do surveys, and you probably do the same thing, I look for the ones that have the negative stuff. I love them. I love them, right? I'm like, this is an this is a gift. When somebody tells you and
Yeah.
hasn't left yet,
Hmm.
hey, I really need your help with this because I love it here and I don't want to leave.
Right.
This is what I need. Right?
And
That is a
and
gift.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And
Hmm.
Eric, and there are people on the opposite end of that spectrum that want to ignore the bad ones and say, "Oh, who are they? They don't know. They're just blah blah blah. They're just complaining. They're just mad." I always say when I do a survey, those ones that at the top that think you walk on water, throw those out,
Mm,
and maybe the very very bottom ones, throw those out, and the truth is probably lies
yeah.
somewhere there, in between. Yeah, yeah,
And it isn't just that one parent. I'm going to give one more example. So
yeah.
this very recently happened at our school. We had one family that came and toured our school and enrolled our school, but she brought her friend on the tour who
Hmm.
went to the same childcare. Well, then they both ended up enrolling. Within 30 days, I had 12 children from that other center.
Wow.
12. Now, I
Wow.
wasn't calling them, I wasn't
No.
pillaging them. Because one told another, they were very close school community. And I said to them, because I felt a little bad, I said,
Yeah.
"Hey, have you guys talked to the owner about this? Like, have you like talked to the director?" They said, "We've never met her." I'm like, "What do you mean you
Mhm.
never met her? How long
Mm.
have you been there?" They had been there over a year. They had never met
Wow.
the
Wow.
owner.
Wow.
So and it was probably something that if somebody was connected could have fixed it, but there was
Sure.
no one for them
Right.
to
Right.
really talk to.
Well,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So
important.
so that brings me to a point that I love to make, and that is we all want a transactional relationship with parents, with staff, right? You come in, you do your job, I pay you, you go home, right? I provide child care for your kids, you pay me, you go home, right? But in reality, it's a relationship. It
It is.
really is has to become a relationship because one of the quotes that really hit home for me was this is trying to hold people accountable, trying to hold people that you don't have a relationship with accountable is perceived by them as harassment.
Mhm.
So if the first time you have have a conversation with somebody, or the first time in 3 months you had a conversation with somebody is critical, and they go, "Back up, we don't, I barely even have had any conversation." We have to have this relationship with them so that they will take the criticism the way
Yeah.
it is meant. Because when you have no relationship,
Hmm.
they see it as harassment.
Yeah. So as we start to like kind of circle around,
Hmm.
um, what types of what would be your advice? Because most of the folks that listen to the show are going to be childcare directors or owners.
Hmm.
What advice would you have for folks in terms of maybe if they haven't held their folks accountable?
Mm-hmm.
and they know that they need to,
Mm-hmm.
where do they start?
Start off so simply, and that is stop being proud of being the fixer. So many directors sit in their office and roam the building fixing every problem thrown at them. So many directors are getting a text or phone call at 5 o'clock in the morning from their assistant director saying, hey, the toddler teacher is going to be out. And the director is lying in bed
Mm-hmm.
or on their way to work at a stoplight going, move Sally down from the preschool room, call Johnny to come in early, get the cook to come. The cook can do the bus run this afternoon, and I'll cover the office, right? I'm telling you right now, directors, you cannot do it on your own.
Yeah.
If you have someone covering your office, they should minimally be able to work out a schedule until you get there. If
Yeah.
you're having to tell them 1 and 1 is 2, you maybe probably have the wrong person working in tandem with you.
Yeah.
When it's the end of, another great example is at the end of the day, it's 4 o'clock and the 4 o'clock person is going home. They call the office to say, hey, I've got 6 kids left. It's time for me to go home. And what does the director say? I'll be right down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they got to go down, and this is something that happens every day.
Mm-hmm.
That person that down there,
No surprise.
they can figure this out. You can train them to figure this process out. That hey, well, 2 kids go there, or 3 kids go there, or you know what? At this time, most days, that classroom can go to one teacher, so Miss Sally can come over here, and she basically instead of calling the office and says, I need you to fix my problem, just call the room next door and say, hey, Sally, how are your numbers? Well, can you come over here? It's time. It's time for me to go home in about 3 or 4 minutes, right? But instead, directors, we fix everything, and we kind of take, not really, but we take pride in fixing it. So the first thing I would say is stop fixing everything. When someone brings you a problem, the first thing I would say is, what do you think we should do about it? How do you think we should handle that, right? And then work them through the solution. And then the next time, what do you think? And then after a few times, you can say, you can handle that.
Mm-hmm.
I know you can figure that out. Because every time we're answering questions, we're burning up some emotional energy. And at the end of the day, we barely can walk to the car because we are exhausted. We
Mm-hmm.
stop at Bojangles. Do y'all have Bojangles where
We
you
do.
are? You know, we stop at the chicken joint and we get chicken,
Yeah.
mashed potatoes, and biscuits or something. Scones, where you are, I don't know.
Yeah.
And we go home and we eat it, and then we crash because we're
Mm-hmm.
so emotionally
Exhausted.
and mentally exhausted. And we've got to start protecting ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Watching a podcast like you do, is what directors need.
Yeah.
They've got to be, because they want to hang out with the people in their building as if they're peers. And
Yeah. They're
those
not.
aren't your peers. You're
No.
their peer. Other people who are watching this podcast, we're the peer, and directors have got to be, we were talking earlier, they've got to be the cheerleaders, because your people will never be more enthusiastic than you.
Yeah.
And when the director goes to the employees level, the team members level, and they start having conversation with employees saying, well, there's no work ethic anymore. Nobody, I'm not surprised she's not here. She calls in sick once a week. People just don't want to work anymore. Ooh, what kind of atmosphere are we developing with our team? We're
Yeah.
literally, if your team member was literally thinking, gosh, I just don't think this place is as good a place to work as it used to be, you just solidified that.
Mm-hmm.
You literally just told your employee, you work with people that aren't great,
Yeah.
right? We've got to step away from being, they're not your peers. We've got to be the leader. We've
Yeah.
got to be the encourager. We've got to be the hope, because our team, they need hope that things are getting better. But in order for things to get better, directors, owners have
Mm-hmm.
to make tough decisions. And tough decisions is holding your people accountable. And
Yeah.
how do you do that? You have to hire. You've got to continue hiring. When someone applies, you need to respond to them within 24 hours. And when you respond to them within 24 hours, it needs to be, can you come in? Can you do a Zoom? Can you do a Zoom call now for our first
Mm-hmm.
interview?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you don't want to do Zoom, can you come in tomorrow morning? It can't be, can you come in a week from Wednesday?
Yeah.
Or because those people are going to, they're going to,
They're already gone.
they're going to go ahead and they're going to get hired because all your competitors are in the exact same boat.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a question, Vernon.
Sure.
This might be a personal question, but
Yeah.
was your mom a fixer of everything?
Yes, at home she was, but when we got into early childhood, I became the go-to. She would send people to me.
Okay.
Yeah, we had one conversation that's kind of funny that people would start going to her the first year or two, and they would say, "Hey, Miss Nancy, we went to Disney last week, and our account's low. Can I pay you next week?" Right? And my mom would say, "Oh, you just pay me when you get it." Well, when you get it, don't come, right? And so I would have to go to my mom and have a conversation and say, "Just want to let you know from now on, when you tell people to pay when you can, I'm gonna start paying you when they do." Never had to have that conversation again. My mom then started saying, "Oh, honey, I don't handle the finances. You got to talk to Mr. Vernon about that." So
Mm-hmm.
she put off everything on me, and I was happy to handle it because I've been that director in the parking lot, knocking on the car, going, "Hi, if you don't bring back some money tomorrow morning, you can't bring that wonderful child there back tomorrow morning. You got to pay in order to drop off," and then turn around and say, "Nice BMW. Let me get in my Toyota and go home because I'm subsidizing care for this person in a Beamer."
Yeah. So the reason I asked you that is I'm guilty of all those things. I did that at first, and my daughter, when I was laughing when you were talking about move the kid, my kid she's only 20. Well, I guess she's old now. She's 26,
Yeah.
and that's her. She is you. She said, "No, mom, it's after 9:30. They're not dropping off. Tell that one." She said, "We're kicking these 3 people out because I can bring in more money because they don't pay us every other week. They're on vacation, yada yada yada." And so, yes, so
Yeah.
I could tell you were second generation.
Yes.
You
Absolutely.
because you watched your mom
Yes.
do things out of her
Mhm.
heart, and people take advantage of that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so my daughter is in that same situation now, where she's like, "No, mom, you're a smart lady, mom, but I'm gonna handle
Yeah.
this. You go
Yeah.
do your thing. They gotta pay." And I'm like, "You're
Yeah.
right. You're right."
It's interesting. One of the quotes I like to use is, "It can't be all about the children until
Yeah.
you can pay for it."
Yeah.
See, people want to sit on their laurels and say, "I'm doing what's best for the children,"
Well,
and I say, "But you can't pay your bills.
yeah.
You can't be about the children until you can pay for it." So once
Yeah.
you get good business mind, business savvy, once you get reserves, so that
Sure.
something happens, you can still pay the payroll that's coming. Because see, I've been that person. I went to bed one night, had
Mm.
125 children in a building that was
Mm-hmm.
destroyed in Hurricane Floyd in 1999. I woke up the next morning and had no building. It was
Yeah.
gone overnight. I learned right then, those bills keep
Mm.
on coming. See,
Yeah.
tuition stopped that day.
Yeah.
I had payroll coming.
Yeah.
I had insurance coming.
Mm-hmm.
I had utilities. I had, you name it. All the bills kept
Yeah.
coming. I didn't even have enough money. I was, so I tell people, if you are using what's collected this week to pay the paychecks that are going out this week,
You're in
you are
trouble.
you are in trouble.
You're in trouble.
You're in
Yeah.
trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, luckily that's not my position, but
Yeah.
it is something that I just think second and third
Yeah.
generation kids
Yeah.
just see,
Mhm. Mhm.
and they instinctively say, "Nope, we're not going to get phone calls during dinner, and we're going to,
Mhm.
collect our tuition,
Yeah.
and we're
Yeah.
going to, we're going to do, we're not dropping off at 10 o'clock in the
Yeah.
morning."
Yeah.
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 So, she holds me accountable.
Yeah.
which is a good thing. And and you just like
Yeah.
your mom. Well, you know what? Sometimes you're just like your mom. Sometimes you send out the email that says from the billing office, which may not have any person.
There is
It takes
nobody
the
there.
personal part out, because you do love them, you do love your
Yeah,
families, you do. But
absolutely.
at the end of the day, you do got to pay your bills.
Oh, I had completely had my clientele believing that the late fee for picking up late automatically came in overnight. There was, oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, it's going to come in
that's
overnight.
right.
You know,
Yeah.
all those. I had them completely convinced that we had nothing to do with that. There's a little
No.
mean person in the cloud
Yes, in the
somewhere.
cloud.
I'll give you her email, mean person in the cloud. I don't know. It could be accounting at yourcompany.com,
Oh
whatever.
my
You know what I mean?
gosh.
But yeah, you got to take care of business. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and ourselves. All
Mhm.
right. So before we wrap up, is there
Yeah.
anything that he didn't ask that you want to share, or anything you want to share with them? It could be connected or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. I would say a really good, other than my books, I would say a really great book out there is Kim Scott. And what's it called? It's called Radical Candor. Have you ever heard of that? Radical Candor. So
No.
in our field, we go around, we are so trained all day that we're going, good job, good job, good job, good job, right? To people that aren't doing a good job, but we're doing it because we're thinking we're helping, right? That we're going to build them up, right? Stop the good job, right? Stop it. When you have something, you should find positive things to say. It should be specific. It should be personal, right?
Yeah,
So please, hand up, hand over heart, whatever. Please stop the good job and start telling people what they're doing good. Make it personal, right?
yeah,
And get the book right along with my books. Get the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott. There's a great YouTube video. Kim Scott, Radical Candor. Look, she goes through a little summary of what she. Oh, it's amazing. It's called Ruinous Empathy, meaning, and that is who we are. We're just so going on and on and on at nauseum, and it just
yeah,
becomes white noise after a while. Yeah,
yeah. Wow, it's great stuff.
yeah,
All right. Well, for our folks that are listening, as always, we appreciate you. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And remember, it's the little details that make a big impact on the success of your childcare business. Have a great day.